Pot of Greed has a simple effect: draw 2 cards. However, the function of a Pot of Greed in the lore world is a lot more complex than that. It's no ordinary pot, you see, but it's inhabited by one or more spirits, one of which is the spirit of Pot of Greed, who was once an angel and visits the pot from time to time. Another is the avatar of the pot, which supposedly materializes when the Pot of Greed reaches its adult form. Regardless, it's these entities that make the pot greedy. This desire for valuable items gives it the ability to suck things in and hoard them inside. This particular sucking can be done through the top of the jar or even through the nostrils. This is the reason behind being able to draw 2 cards, as reaching into the pot, you'd most likely find something of worth. Pot of Greed would also make more appearances in different timelines. Upstart Goblin found himself making lots of money through real estate and stocks. It was due to the surging bubble economy. He became nouveau rich, aka he only acquired this wealth in his generation, and like what new money does, he showed off a lot and played around a lot and even behaved arrogantly to those that were lower than him, tossing out pennies to beggars and lowlives. His arrogant days wouldn't last long though. In economic terms, a bubble is a period where there's a rapid increase in asset value. This inflation is what led to upstart Goblin's riches, but the reason why it's called a bubble is because it eventually bursts, or, in other terms, it crashes, and that crash victimized Goblin's company as well as all of his assets, leaving the Goblin bankrupt. Crashes hit especially hard if you're too cocky during the come-up, and so he lost pretty much everything he gained during the rise of the bubble economy. Properties gone, money gone, there was nothing. It also didn't help that he partied irresponsibly and also experienced robbery at the hands of the Dark Scorpions. Having nothing, the Goblin turned into a beggar and found himself at the receiving end of arrogance from the wealthy. He recalled the time where other people would get on their knees for him. All in all, this was a very humiliating moment for the Goblin. It was at this moment where he told himself he couldn't be pathetic like this, begging and kneeling to survive. But the path he would take after this would not be a noble one. "People have stolen from me before, and I'm gonna do the same," thought the Goblin. His first theft was a jar of greed from the back of a supply crate. He then moved on to stealing a pot of greed from inside the store. This was a new low for our Goblin, as he had never actually stooped to crime. He would then attempt to sell these stolen goods first to the nobleman who he was begging from earlier. Now, what I assume happened here is that the nobleman did end up buying it, but in return's card artwork, we see the handle comes off. We can probably assume the pot of greed he stole was a fake. He forces the Goblin to refund him and also reports him to the police, as he was forced to pay a fine for stealing the goods. However, as you can see, he didn't have much to his name or his pockets. Law enforcement refuses the pennies, of course, throws the jar of greed against him, destroying it and also getting him sent to prison. After some time in contemplation in the hole, he goes back to supposedly his childhood dreams, abandoning his life of crime as he decides to work in a factory mass-producing Moki Mokis. But it wasn't before long that he went back to his thieving ways, finding yet another pot of greed in the factory and pawning it off for a quick buck. Meanwhile, in another place, for some unknown reason, a dream clown surrounded by a swarm of scarabs has a hammer in his hands and looks to be attempting to smash both the pot of generosity and the pot of greed. It appears he did end up succeeding, and that the owner of these 2 pots would end up salvaging the items by combining them both into one pot, becoming the Pot of Duality. Our Goblin protagonist, through unknown means, would come to acquire this Pot of Duality later on. Our poor Goblin was making nowhere near the same amount of money he used to, so he had to supplement his income in various ways, including taking up housekeeping, tending to a home in a field filled with weeds, and apart from his allergies, he also had another surprise waiting for him. While mowing the lawn, he encountered a sinister serpent hiding in the tall grass, and my interpretation of the event is he went full Pokemon trainer and captured the sinister serpent in none other than the Pot of Greed. We can see the serpent being a bit of a pain for him later as he heads back to the marketplace. It looks to have escaped from the pot, actually breaking it in the process. Also notice the avatar of the pot in the background playing with the Pot of Generosity. This could be another way that the Pot of Duality was formed. And if you look closely, you'll also notice that this is specifically where the Shard of Greed is from. This Pot of Greed with the missing eye shard can also be seen in single purchase along with the Pot of Duality, which our Goblin somehow acquired. That eyeless pot of greed would then become a slot machine, which actually might be a genius way to extract the fortunes that are hidden in the pot. Unfortunately, there's no definitive ending to this lore. But if we can learn anything from the life of the once named upstart goblin, maybe we should be more responsible and less arrogant with our money. Who knows? If he had taken a wiser route, he may have survived the crash of the bubble economy. That arrogance and the fact that he turned to theft and greed led this once rich man to spiral down into a life of mediocrity.